I am excited and honored today to have Brad Ball on the podcast. Brad's the co-founder of Ardent Creative, a full-service creative agency specializing in design, development, marketing, and AI solutions. He's also the co-founder of Verity Software and a partner in the Committed Mastermind. Although Brad's a successful entrepreneur, he's also an award-winning artist. For Brad, those two cannot be separated. Many of the connections he's made in his business career can be traced back to his performance art painting, where he expresses his artistry live and on stage. A firm believer, nothing is by chance. Brad knows that the brush and canvas have forever shaped his life, and his clients are fortunate recipients of that creativity. Brad, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being on the show.
I'm glad I'm here. It's always fun hearing your own bio read back to you.
Right. How am I supposed to respond to that? Yeah,
Right.
it's all true. Yeah.
Pretty much.
Welcome to Catalytic Leadership, the podcast designed to help leaders intentionally grow and thrive. Here is your host, author, and leadership and executive coach, Dr. William Attaway.
Brad, I want to start with a bit of your story. I'd love for you to share some of your story with our listeners, particularly around your journey and your development as a leader. How did you get started?
Well, I guess it all starts going back to college. And, I got an art degree. Never thought I'd be in business. And, but in that, ended up becoming a pastor back in around 2000. And I think, when you become a pastor, you naturally have to become a leader. And so I was a youth pastor. And so obviously got lots of eyes looking at you and be an example. And I was very much lead by example type of attitude throughout my career. And that's evolved over time. But I would say that was the root of it, just foundationally in church and growing up.
I think that one of the things from our conversation really fascinated me and impressed me was how, faith is not just an optional add-on in your life. This is a core part of who you are, even outside of your time spent as a pastor.
Well, I think leadership goes well beyond just kind of what you're taught. I think there's inherent values and beliefs that people have, whether that's Christian or something else. And mine's obviously based upon, my faith, but our company is not necessarily a Christian company. We hire people from all walks of life. And part of that is just so, I can be who I am to everybody. And that's a part of leadership. It's, and so, we've had many conversations, whether it was faith or science or any of that type of stuff. But leadership is about, in some ways, just being there for the team that's around you, being available. And for me, it's always been, like I said, by example. And so if you want to have great employees, then you need to be, you need to lead that way. And in the same sense, I remember I'll tell you a story as it relates to leadership in our company is that we're very family oriented. I have kids that are now 17, about to graduate high school in just a few months. And so I could have easily made a lot more money over the years if I wanted to sacrifice family over money. And so that's one of our inherent core values is, family is important. As long as you get your work done, take the time you need to develop your family. Because I believe that if your house is in order, your work's going to be in order and vice versa. And the minute those get out of alignment is the minute one of those areas suffers. And we were coming up on Christmas, this might have been 8 to 10 years ago now, one of our key developers who's not Christian, he's very scientific oriented and very dry, let's say. He's a developer. And we had some difficult experiences early on. And part of it was just communication and understanding. And I remember sitting outside of our parking lot one day and we're having this conversation. It was kind of heated because we had some culture issues at the time. And he said something about the company and it triggered in my mind. It's like, he's not being difficult to be difficult. He wants to see the best in this company. And he's just very direct about saying and communicating that. And when that clicked, our relationship and him as it relates to the company has been night and day different. And he's been with us for over 10 years now. But about Christmas, we were giving out Christmas bonuses. And I had our executive team. We wrote out the names, and they were direct deposit at the time, but we went through each employee that was there and said something encouraging or a win that they had that year. And I had each person on our executive team go through different people. And this particular employee came up to me afterwards and he goes, "Brad, Ardent is the best place I've ever worked for." He said,
Wow.
when you talk about family, you mean it." And he's still with us today, and he's now he's on our leadership team. And it's just, I think when you lead in that manner, it creates a culture that's very different than what you see in a lot of other companies.
I love that. I think every team, every business has a culture. You either have one you created on purpose or you have one that you didn't mean to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you are designing and protecting that culture at Arden. I think that's so healthy. That's good leadership.
And it wasn't always that way. Truth
Mm,
be told, is that there was a very difficult time. We had to let go of my first hire person I trained, and for a couple of years we went through this really dark period. And I didn't understand what culture and values or any of that really meant,
mm.
because we were young and we worked and did what we did and we were excellent at it. But how do you build a business? I have an art degree. I don't have a business degree. My business partner sold cars, so we had to learn what that
Wow.
meant. And reading through the book Traction by Gina Whitman was a help. And there's a bunch of different books, but and we really established that early on or soon after that period, and saw a complete shift in our company. And I would say Traction for
Mm,
me as a leader was a big part of that.
I love that. So how did you get, and we kind of skipped over this, but how did you get from, art degree,
Mm-hmm.
pastorate, marketing agency? Like how did that turn happen?
Well, so in college, I worked in the communication office doing design and then the school paper. And when I graduated with my degree, I worked doing design in the university. And in that time, I was a youth leader. And in 2000, my mom got sick and was diagnosed with a terminal disease. So I quit my job to take care of her. And so that's really how I started my business. And what's kind of ironic is in college, I had a business course. It was one of the core curriculums, and I made pretty much all A's, a few B's, and had two C's in college. And one was a history class that I could go into details. It was very difficult. And I had a business class, and I would have made an A or a B, but I bombed one test because I went completely blank. I'd never gone completely blank in a test before, and I think it's just ironic. Guess what the subject was about?
Marketing?
Marketing. And here we are, and
Wow.
it's now I'm on the business board of advisors, and made a C in the class. But it's just kind of funny now telling that story. But I'm
That's
very much my expertise and where I would say I'm excellent at is branding strategy
mm,
and those types of things. I don't get into the weeds anymore as it relates to marketing or that you know hey, this is where the ad buy goes. I'm looking at the marketing as a whole, strategy, customer avatar, those types of things.
yeah.
As it relates to leadership, I've kind of have the Henry Ford mentality where you've got a team of people that are experts. I may
Yes.
understand aspects of it, but if you want to get into the weeds of how Google Ads works, I've got a guy.
That's right.
And so that's kind of my approach as it relates to leaders.
Well, I think that's healthy because it allows you to do the things that only you can do. If you're in the weeds, if you're, like doing the mechanics of a Google ad, that's time that you're not spent doing the things that only you can do.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and I think that's the hard part, especially early on. I had to learn as a leader was I had the mindset of if you want it done right, you do it yourself.
Yeah.
Because even today, I'm probably one of the fastest designers. My brain just clicks that way artistically, and I'm just extremely fast with that. But I had to let go of that and let my team or employees really learn, and at some points fail to get better and to learn. And that's what has made us a stronger company. I think as leaders, it's hard to do that sometimes because you're used to doing it a certain way. But if you hire capable people, you can train them and lead them in a much bigger way. And so if you can, in some ways, clone yourself, that would be great. But the more you sow into people, the more they're going to learn. And now we have team members that sound just like me because they've been in meetings long enough to know what to say. Or sometimes I don't even have to ask, what do you think about a design? They're already going to know because they've spent enough time with me.
Mm.
And so then I can really step away and look at things from a 30,000-foot view, develop relationships and things like that.
I think some of the folks listening may be listening to your story and maybe they've checked you out online and they think, oh, wow, yeah, well, Brad, man, his journey's just been up and to the right. Like he's never had to deal with the struggles and the challenges and the difficult days that I have to deal with. He's just his ride's just been just a rocket to the right. If they were to stand in front of you and say that, what would your response be?
I would say they're naive. If you've been in business for any length of time, you're going to go through, ups and downs. Business
Yeah.
is a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And I've written about that. There's no smooth sailing. If it is, they're lying to you. When
Yeah.
you look at YouTube sensations like Mr. Beast or Hermosi or any of those guys, they put in the work for years before they exploded. It's not like it just happens overnight. And
Mm.
so, I've had IRS audits. I've had to sue people. I've had sales tax audits, and those aren't fun to walk through.
Mm.
But it's a part of business. But that's also what makes you stronger. And
Mm.
so I've walked through 9/11, the market crash in the 08, 09. Actually built a house in that time too, which is kind of interesting.
Oh my goodness.
Uh, but I can go through our books and we were very good in some of those early times because we were small and agile.
Mm.
So we actually grew during the 08, 09 era. But then COVID was, a whole other animal. We were
Mm.
ready for it, but a lot of our clients weren't. And so obviously we took a big hit there. In the
Yeah.
last couple of years have been up and down, and we've been trying to build softwares and launching those. And so we've invested in a lot of other things and navigating employees that aren't necessarily bringing money to the bottom line, but you're building out something. It's just a tough road when you're trying to do things that are outside the box
Mm.
and build something unique.
So tell me about Verity Software. What is that about?
So we built a software for an oil and gas client back in 2018, and they didn't have the budget, so we retained the IP and we're going to take it to oil and gas, and then it crashed. Uh,
Mm.
you know, Oil and gas plummeted, so there was, we had some people lined up to look at it, and then they weren't spending money anymore. And so we kind of migrated that during COVID. We rebuilt it from scratch during COVID and to try to go into different markets. One was schools, because in Texas, the Senate mandated that schools need to threat assess and track students after the Uvalde shooting. And so, like, well, our software basically does that, so let's redo it. And so, but schools were a nightmare. COVID hit and basically shut that down because they
Mm.
weren't looking at it. And so that's kind of been, hidden. And then in the Build Back Better plan, Biden put in there oil and gas companies need to track methane emissions or they're going to get fined. And obviously, with the politics of that, there's some nuances. But we went ahead and added that feature into the software. And so we have officially launched it this year. The client that originally had us build the software is in the new software and using it 100% now. And so we're kind of in the launch phase. But what it does, it manages a well site, not the drill itself, but like the property around it. So they can track and manage incidents. If something's stolen, because oil and gas companies know if a certain person walks on a well site, it's going to cost them X amount of dollars. And if they can
Mm.
mitigate that, they can save a lot of money. And so the client has ultimately saved about $2 million year over year by utilizing their process and the software to mitigate those incidents. And so that was a great case study. And so now we're just trying to get that software out there. And so it's been, 4 or 5 years now, and we put a lot of investment in that. And how we got into that is because we build websites and we have in-house developers and we do complex application development. And so they came to us, hey, can you do this? Yes, and we just ended up building our own.
Mm. And you're a partner in the Committed Mastermind, which is where you and I met
That's
at
correct.
one of the mastermind events. How do you balance all of these different things? I mean, the old proverb, chase two rabbits, catch none. You are demonstrating that it's possible to lead at a very high performing level with multiple things, multiple irons in the fire, so to speak. What's your secret?
Well, I would say sometimes I feel like I'm failing, but I think it's putting people in positions to that you trust to do the job for you. And leaders necessarily aren't meant to do the work. You hire teams and you build people to do that work. And I think a successful business, the leader isn't involved in the day to day. Because if you
Yes,
go to exit, the more that leader is involved, it devalues the business.
that's right.
And so probably 7 or 8 years ago, I was trying to work out of that day to day. And so I would say the reason why I feel like failing is like, what should I be doing in the business? Because I'll design a little bit, but not as much. But my creative director, kind of my ops guy, he's like, you don't need to be doing this stuff. And so they try not to give me certain things because I shouldn't be involved in the day to day. And so that's true leadership is when you have a team that takes the mantle and runs with it. And then you just basically lead them, build them up, train them, you're there as somewhat of a coach or consultant.
It's great counsel. It's almost as though you have continued to grow and learn as you have led, and that yields so much fruit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, like, how do you do that? How do you continue to level up
So
and develop the skills that your team and your clients need you to have?
the easy answer is masterminds.
Mm,
Which is how I got into the committed mastermind. So I was in one called C12, which is a Christian board, basically.
yeah.
Then I went into EO, and we were a sponsor for Fort Worth EO for a while, and then ended up joining one called War Room. And I'd say War Room was probably the most beneficial. I mean, just the people in the room were amazing.
Mm,
And I remember there's a guy named Roland Frazier, and we talked to our attorneys, how do you do this or you do this? And in one session, he outlined business structure, you know, family trust and holding companies. And right, okay, we've been asking questions for months, and there it is. But hearing books in that room and then
mm,
digging into that of what's going to be the most valuable to me as a leader. Um, and Amazon Audible has been a huge game changer for me. So I'm a visual guy, but with Audible, I can listen to a lot more content faster.
mm, yeah.
Um, but just being in that room and being around those leaders, even though I may not feel like I'm on the same level as many of those guys, or I even, especially in the beginning, that I was a fit in the room, that I belonged. I learned over time that there is value. And how I got involved in Committed was I was speaking at an event and asked how many agencies in that room had done over $1 million. And two people, there's probably 40 people in the room. Two people raised their hand. One was my mastermind partner,
Mm,
and then another was one of my buddies who owns a VA company. And that was more than likely in his VA, but none of the other people in that room had done over $1 million. And so it made me step back. It's like, okay, I do have something to share and I do have value. And that kind of led into conversations with JC Height and Karen over there with Committed, and ultimately where they asked me to be a part of the team.
There's so much value in learning from other people and putting yourself in environments like that with a teachable spirit and a teachable posture. I think adds so much value. And I really want to challenge the listeners. If you are not engaged in a mastermind environment, you need to make that a priority in 2025, because there's nothing that will help you go farther, faster than learning from a community of people who are like-minded, who understand the entrepreneurial journey. And I love that you shared that, Brad. Thank you for that.
Of course.
So where does painting fit in? Because you're a painter, a stage painter. You paint on stage in front of live audiences
Mm-hmm.
and come up with some phenomenal, just astounding works that I have seen. Where does that fit into the life of Brad?
So it comes in waves. Early on, when I first started, I did about half painting and half design, and then also youth pastoring on the side. that's how I kind of took care of my mom and grew. And
Yeah.
then in 2004, 3 or 4, I was so busy doing design, I gave up the pastoring because it wasn't fair to the kids
Okay.
and focused just on design. And so eventually business took over. And so it's like 1 month I'll have 2 events and then go dark for 3 or 4 months.
Mm.
But I still do painting. Like I just did a painting for an event. It was a studio painting. Um, and it went very well. But
Wow.
it's the painting fits in as a creative outlet. And if you look at creativity and your business, it doesn't matter who you are, what you think, what you do. You're creative by nature. And I think that's how
Yeah.
God created us as human beings throughout our
Yes.
history. If you have kids, look at them. Their imaginations are amazing. Their creativity is off the charts. But then we're stuck in an educational system that suppresses that. And I'm actually in the process of finishing a book called Art of Entrepreneurs Unlocking Your Creative Genius, which kind of
Ooh.
outlines some of my journey and the artistic side of it. And the more you tap into that creativity, the more you're going to impact your business. And example of that is I was doing this painting I just mentioned recently, and we had this new client that came across. They wanted a logo design, and they were kind of burned by a previous agency. They didn't like what came out, and so my team did a couple different versions, which were good. And I was like, "Here, let me have a stab at it." So I'd been creating, and I took this concept, and something just triggered. I was like, "What about this?" And I mocked it up in like 10 minutes, gave it to my creative director. He put it in the presentation, and they ended up choosing that design.
Wow.
But I was in that frame of mind of creativity and almost visionary thinking that when I saw it, it just boom, it came to me, and that's what happened. I've had more vision, more dreams, and things like that when I'm in that mindset. It's a really challenging entrepreneurs and leaders to tap into something creative, because if you're struggling with ideas, that's the outlet to increase those ideas. And so that's kind of the premise of the book, talking about uh, looking at things from different perspectives and some of my artistic journeys. But I mean, I'm an artist by trade, and that's rolling into the business. I always struggled with how to merge art and business and painting together. And so this is kind of that avenue of how they all fit together.
That's fascinating. I cannot wait to read this book. This sounds like something I'm going to just dive into, and I can't wait to. When does this one come out?
Well, I was hoping I'd have it ready for Christmas, and I've got one of my buddies who's an editor. He's had some stuff happen, so he hasn't gone through the final. It's basically the final edit. I'm on the third
Yeah.
edit.
Yeah.
Once I get that back, and I'm not trying to pressure him because he's kind of doing it as a friend, and he's a very well established editor, and waiting for that. And then once I get that back, I'll probably have a release date early in the year. So I
Awesome.
want it to be done right, and I want it to
Yeah.
be as good as it can be, but also not overthink it too. As an artist, sometimes I'm very much stage painter. Nothing's ever perfect.
Yeah.
There's some artists that they keep going and they keep going until it's perfect.
Right.
I think there's a lot in the imperfection that people miss. And the same thing can be applied in anything in your lives. It's through that imperfection that we learn and grow. And so, we'll see what happens. I'm excited where it is. I started with like 33,000 words, went through a first round of edit. Now it's at like 48,000 words, enhancing
Wow.
stories and, telling stories like Netflix. You think about Netflix and what they've done. If they weren't creative and visionary thinking, they would have died back in the blockbuster days.
Yeah.
And even now, if they didn't start doing their own content, Disney and all those other content creators would have shut them down. And
It's true.
those types of stories that people know, but they don't always realize. And if you can apply those types of stories into your own business and get a different perspective, it's going to have a huge impact.
I love that. As you are in this continual learning posture, is there a book that has made a big difference in your journey that you would recommend to the leaders who are listening? Hey, if you haven't read this, check it out.
Well, there's a few of my favorite books. I mentioned Traction already for Mission, Vision, Culture. Um, there's another one. like Dream Big by Bob Goff is a
Mhm.
good one.
Yeah.
Why am I going blank?
Love Bob Goff.
There's, oh man, now I have to look it up. There's one of my favorites that nobody ever hears about, and I'm going completely blank. So give me 1 second.
Well, now I have to know it. If nobody hears about it, that may be one I haven't read. So bring it.
That's probably true. Oh, no, another one that's really good business wise is Hard Thing About Hard Things. That's a great book. Mad Genius by Randy Gage.
Ooh, I don't know that one.
Yeah, it's a creative book. It's probably what inspired me in some ways to write my book. But yeah, it's a great, easy read. But if you need a motivational book, aside from the language, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins is probably one of my favorite books of all time. Just what he did. He was, I'll just give you a little synopsis. He was a Navy SEAL that went through SEAL school 3 times. He dropped 100 pounds just to get into SEAL school in a matter of a couple months.
My goodness.
And he puts his mind to something and he does it. And it's amazing. True story, biography. It's phenomenal. If you need an inspirational book to get yourself out of your chair and, do something crazy, that's another one.
Brilliant. I look forward to reading it. Thank you for those.
Yeah. Sorry for the delay on Magic.
No, it's all good. There are so many great reads, and I find in asking this question, not only do I get to learn about books that I may not be familiar with, but our listeners do as well, and we get to build a list, to read list, which I think every leader should have. The books that you want to read next that other people have mentioned. You're like, I want to dive into that.
Yeah.
Brad, every time we talk, I learn something, and I'm encouraged and inspired, and this is no exception. I'm sure our listeners feel exactly the same way. And if they want to connect with you, learn more about what you're doing, what is the best way for them to do that?
The easiest way is just to go to bradball.com. Or my LinkedIn or social handles, they all are I am Brad Ball.
Nice.
Originally, they were Brad Ball Art, but that was kind of confusing because people thought Brad Ball Art. Oh. And so I switched.
Nice. Wise. I like that. We will have those links in the show notes. Brad, thank you for your generosity in time today and in sharing what you've learned so far in your journey and sharing those insights. So grateful, and I look forward to seeing what's next for you, because I think your best is yet to come.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thanks for joining me for this episode today. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do 2 things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, if you don't have a copy of my newest book, Catalytic Leadership, I'd love to put a copy in your hands. If you go to catalyticleadershipbook.com, you can get a copy for free. Just pay the shipping so I can get it to you, and we'll get one right out. My goal is to put this into the hands of as many leaders as possible. This book captures principles that I've learned in 20 plus years of coaching leaders in the entrepreneurial space, in business, government, nonprofits, education, and the local church. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take a next step with a coach to help you intentionally grow and thrive as a leader, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to catalyticleadership.net to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, leaders, choose to be catalytic.
Thanks for listening to Catalytic Leadership with Dr. William Attaway. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode. Want more? Go to catalyticleadership.net.